very pleasant good morning, a very pleasant good afternoon, a very pleasant good evening, whatever your timeline is and wherever you are located. As we say in our language, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. You see how beautiful it is when we greet it in Tagalog? We don't say mabuting araw. It's actually magandang araw anyway. And it all occupies already whatever time of day there is. So anyway, last week, we were supposed to discuss this topic. I think you're seeing it now, the Marcoses and the PCGG, but we had no, we ran out of time because of this long narrative I was doing on the ISIS, the Daesh, the terrorists, these extreme militants that behead people that would want to establish a caliphate, and that practically took most of our hour. But it was important to discuss that because, as I've already emphasized last week, and andito na sila nakapasok na nga sa Marawi several 2 years ago. At sinasabi na rin ng mga bansa dito sa ASEAN, sa Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we have to be very vigilant because they are really crawling already within our area. So that closes the topic there. Unless you have questions regarding this, pwede pa rin natin pag-usapan. But the other topic that we were supposed to discuss last week, we are going to discuss it today. Because about a week or 2 weeks ago, to be exact, there was an issued statement by the Makabayan Bloc sa Congress ito at saka yung mga ibang mga sympathizers nila na nagsabi yung decision daw na isinagawa ng Sandigang Bayan at ng Korte laban sa mga Marcoses, which actually dismissed the case against them, was a malicious decision. In fact, ang pagkasabi nila, there was malice in that decision, there was an intent to rewrite history. In fact, they say that it was an insult to the Filipino people. So we're going to tackle that in this hour because the malice is in the law that Mrs. Aquino executed. The first executive order, as a matter of fact, when she sat in the office of the president, was the executive order creating the office of what is known as the Presidential Commission on Good Government, yung PCGG. And I will read to you the first paragraph of this executive order number 1. Remember, this was the first thing that she signed as soon as she sat there. Whereas vast resources of the government have been amassed by former President Ferdinand E. Marcos, his immediate family, relatives, and close associates, both here and abroad. Isipin ninyo, dyan pa lang sa first paragraph, may conclusion na. Saan ka makakita na immediately dyan sa first line ng kanyang executive order, sinentensyahan na niya ang mga Marcoses? Yan. They amassed, the vast resources of the government have been amassed. So sinabi na kaagad dyan sa first line na yung resources ng government kinuha ni Marcos, hindi lang si Marcos. Ferdinand Marcos, his immediate family, relatives, yan relatives na yan on both sides, relatives ng Marcos, relatives ng Romualdez, which is Mrs. Marcos' side of the partnership, nilang dalawa, and the close associates. Close associates, ang ibig sabihin yan, like for instance, kagaya namin, na nagtatrabaho kami sa Malacanang, covering Malacanang for television, or those covering it for radio, or perhaps those who are writing about Malacanang, they're all associates. They're not really friends of the Marcoses, but we are considered associates kasi andun kami. Ibig sabihin kasama kami dito. Which is exactly what happened, because when they came out, when the government of Mrs. Aquino came out with a list of those that are not allowed to leave the country, ang tawag dyan yung hold order. Diyan yata nag-umpisa yung hold order na yan, that we could not leave the country because the Department of Justice has a hold order against us. That is because of this first line. Okay, I'll read the second line. And so therefore, there is an urgent need to recover all ill-gotten wealth. That's the second line. So you could see in the first two lines of the executive order of Mrs. Aquino, she already sentenced the Marcoses of having stolen or amassed the vast resources of government. Can you imagine that? Sino ang may malis? The decision of the court or the executive order creating? Ito, dito na lang, nakita mo na kaagad yung malis. Anyway, it goes on and on saying that all businesses, enterprises, etc., anything that could be connected to them must be sequestered by this office that was created, the PCGG. So pag sequester, pag titingnan nyo yung definition ng sequestration, ang ibig sabihin yan, kukunin muna ng government yan until you can determine first the ownership of whatever it is that you sequestered, and second, the color of the money that purchased that particular property. So dalawang bagay ang kailangan ipakita. Kaya sila nagsisequester. They did not do that anymore. What they did was they immediately just sequestered anything associated with the Marcoses. Kaya, how long has it been? 1986, 33 years. They opened the private chambers of Ferdinand and Imelda who lived in Malacanang. So even their personal belongings there, underwear for instance, yung mga pajamas, yung ginagamit ng mga damit, yung suklay, yung pabango, these are personal things. Wag nang pag-usapan yung jewelry na sinabi ng hinakot din ng PCGG. But the personal items there, do you know that up to this day, yung mga sapatos ni Mrs. Marcos andun na display na sabi, 3,000 pairs daw yun. Lahat yun are personal items actually. And they sequestered that. You know? Because nasaan ang mali siya dyan? Nakikita mo dyan talaga yung malis. Anyway, I'm talking about this because precisely, it really struck me when they say that a decision dismissing the case against the Marcoses has some malice and an intent to rewrite history. What is history that is being rewritten? Over 900 cases were filed against the Marcoses, meaning Ferdinand, Imelda, and all their 3 children. And of course, the other relatives and associates and what they call cronies or whatever. Pero dun lang sa pamilya ng Marcos, ilan yan? 900 cases. Over the past so many years, lahat yan na-dismiss, yung mga cases na yan. Bakit na-dismiss? Because they could not find any evidence that all of these properties or that cash or that money or the bank accounts came from the money of the Filipino people. Nasaan bang pera ng Filipino people? Where is your money? Your money is taken over by the government through taxes, di ba? Yun ang pera ng taong bayan. Nagbabayad tayo ng buwis and the taxes go into the National Treasury and the Department of Finance is the one together with the Budget Commission. They're the ones that will handle all that money and find out how it will be divided according to the agencies of the government. Yan ang nagpapalakad sa ating pamahalaan. That's the money. That's our money. Kaya nga pag sinasabi na, kinonsulta ba ang taong bayan sa paggagawa nitong karsada na ito, sa paggawa ng dam na yan, sa kanilang tinatayo? Kailangan kinukonsultahan. There has to be a private, public knowledge of this because that is our money. We have to know. But we have relegated this to the congressmen, yung mga supposedly mga legal minds. Congress is composed of the lower chamber, yan yung ating mga district representatives, and the upper chamber, which is the Senate. So lahat-lahat na yan, ilan sila? Sa Congress lang, there are 300 of them. Sa Senate, there are 24 of them. So 324 legal minds. They're the ones who actually will go over the budget that is prepared by the Office of the President. Sabi ko nga, yung Department of Finance and the Department of Budget, silang gumagawa ng budget na yan. In other words, kung magkano yung nakolekta nila and the projected collections pa, nilalagay na nila ngayon yung mga itemized na kung saan pupunta yan. Sa Department of Health, ganitong halaga, sa Department of Education, etc. It's a very tedious kind of work, and it's also very meticulous that they have to go through it because they have to be very careful with this. That is the money of the people. It's practically almost sacred. Wag nilang lulustayin. But that's not what always happens. Alam naman natin pa madalas saan pumupunta yung pera na yan. Sa kaliwa at sa kanan na bulsa, as they say. And that is where corruption comes in. But, going back to what this executive order says, itong sinabi ni Mrs. Aquino, whereas the Marcoses amassed the vast resources of government. So doon pa lang sinabi na, are you rewriting history? Is that history? Is that historical? So what they did in order to prove their point that these vast resources were taken by the Marcoses, they filed 900 cases against the Marcoses. And over the years, lahat yan na-dismiss kasi wala silang nakitang evidence na nanggaling merong kinuha na pera si Marcos sa Central Bank o sa Treasury or sa Department of Finance o sa BIR at ginamit ito for personal reasons, personal na ginamit niya. Because all of this money, as we've said, is taken care of by the departments that will allocate this for the management of governance, for the management and administration of the different executive departments and government as a whole. Yan ang tinatawag natin na budgetary procedure. As a matter of fact, right now, those of you who are abroad, right now we have already had the approval of the budget in the lower chamber, that is a Congress. Now it is in the Senate, and they're reviewing now the budget for next year. So 2020 budget ang kanilang tinatapos. When that is already finished, as far as they discuss this, lahat ng mga allocations doon, it will be submitted to the President. He will sign this into law, and then you call it as a General Appropriations Act. So we go back again to what they're saying here in this executive order. And from the time this was written, which was in 1986, up to this day, media and all of these people keep on saying that Marcos stole the money of the people. So who is rewriting history? Because historically, if we look at the expenditures that Marcos had over the 20 years of his administration, I think I wrote it down here somewhere. Doon natin makikita kung saan ginamit itong pera na hinawakan nung panahon ni Marcos sa budget na yan. So, we had, for instance, the budget of Marcos from 1965 to 1986. That's 20 years. 486 273 billion pesos. 20 years yan. 486 and 273 billion pesos. Where did it go? We had all the roads that were constructed from north to south. We had the dams, the airports, the seaports. We had all of the water resources. We have electricity up to the barrios. It's why they call it rural electrification. We had a massive land reform program. And then, as I was mentioning the other time, we had all the dams actually for our water supply, including those centering into Metro Manila with the projection that the population in the metropolitan Manila area will increase. And several others were also set there. We had the first LRT constructed, which up to now hindi pa nasisira. That was 33 years ago. And then we had several other programs and projects that were constructed. We had the tertiary hospitals for the first time. Actually, after all the years that we were in existence, actually, that we had the government, it was for the first time that we had tertiary hospitals. What does it mean, tertiary? Ito yung mga highly specialized. The Heart Center, the Philippine Heart Center, anong sabi nga? Ang title dati niyan is the Philippine Heart Center for Asia. Hindi lang para sa atin, pati sa Asia. Why? Because when that was constructed, lahat ng mga equipment and facilities that were installed there, talagang inikot yan ni Mrs. Marcos all over the world. Pumunta siya sa mga heart specialists and heart hospitals sa Texas, sa Amerika. Tiningnan niya lahat ng mga equipment na ginagamit dyan for different kinds of surgery and different kinds of application for the care of the heart. As a matter of fact, when she was going there, tinatanong anong mga hospital directors, where are you going to bring this? Why are you buying this? And she would say, it's for the Philippines. Do your doctors know how do you operate this? And, etc. Kasi talagang mga state-of-the-art ang binili lahat. That is for the Heart Center. And there is also a provision in the Heart Center na yung mga mayayaman na magpapagamot doon, meron yung kanilang ibabayad will go to people who cannot afford surgery or whatever facilities that they need in the heart center. Kaya ang dami-dami doon na mga tinutulungan na mga hindi nila kayang magbayad para sa sa mga dalubhasa, yung mga experts, mga experts sa heart. Ang tumutulong dyan are the rich people who go there, at tapos meron yung kanilang binabayad, pumupunta yan sa mga hindi nga kayang who cannot afford. And that is the Philippine Heart Center. And up to this day, you could see that it's still functioning, and it's still you still have all the experts there and the doctors. As a matter of fact, when it started operation, they invited Dr. Christian Bernard, who was in South Africa. You remember the first open heart surgery, heart transplant, lahat ng ginagawa sa puso, yung mga bypass, angiogram, whatever it is, lahat yon pinakita niya, demonstrated it not only for the Filipino doctors or the heart specialists that we have, but also for the Southeast Asian countries na mga kapitbahay natin. There were a lot of doctors from Singapore, from Thailand, from Malaysia, from Indonesia. They came and doon sila nag-training sila sa Philippine Heart Center under all of these experts na inimbita, and they stayed here for several months just to first how to use the equipment, second how to perform open heart surgery. That's the Philippine Heart Center, and to this day it's still functioning there. Nakakatuwa nga kasi merong mural dyan sa pagpasok mo sa gitna ng mga kabataan na natulungan ng Heart Center and all. Meron doon yung mukha ni Mrs. Marcos. Nung pumasok itong administration ni Mrs. Aquino, tinakban nila ng panyulito yung mukha ni Mrs. Marcos doon sa mural, ganyan. Isn't it hilarious? She was the one who was responsible for looking into this facilities and equipment at the building of the Heart Center. And just because her face is there in a mural, hindi lang mabura. They could not remove it because andun sa wall. Pag entrada mo sa Heart Center, makikita mo na yon andun. And it's not even a very big face. It's just, a resemblance of Mrs. Marcos, parang out of gratitude to the fact that she was able to construct a tertiary hospital for the heart, and the heart is the most treacherous of all our organs. Anyway, parang how ridiculous these people are. And where is the malice? Sila ang merong malice. Tinakban ng panyulito yung mukha ni Mrs. Marcos. Now they've removed it finally. Anyway, there is also the kidney center. Nako, ngayon, number 1 na yan talagang tumitira sa atin sa sakit, diabetes and all of this, kidney problems and all. Nagkaroon tayo ng another tertiary hospital, the kidney center. Andyan na rin yung mga dialysis machines. And again, as I've said, Secretary Ona of the Department of Health in several administrations, and just the previous administration likewise, he was the one na sinama ni Mrs. Marcos para mag-ikot din sa buong mundo. Tiningnan yung mga kidney hospitals and also the kind of facilities, equipment, laboratories, lahat na yan na ginagamit for any disease connected to the kidney. And again, the same question, tinanong din. I got this personally when I interviewed Dr. Ona, tinatanong nga daw siya, do you people in the Philippines, do you know how to use this equipment? Alam ba niyo kung paano ito? And it's funny because Dr. Ona is one of the best of our kidney experts, and natawa na lang siya. Anyway, that is what we have in the kidney center. And there is another tertiary hospital which is the lung center. And because of that, practically, yung mga nagkakasakit ng TB, tuberculosis, at any kind of lung disease, saan sila dinadala? Doon sa Quezon Institute. It's a very big facility na punong-puno ng puno. Doon sila, mga pasyente yan na meron TB. But because of what we have done, what they have done at the time sa lung center, we were able to practically exterminate tuberculosis, or hindi na yan killer disease sa atin because of that. And of course, marami pa rin na kinakailangan magamot dyan. Again, the lung center is a tertiary hospital for all of these diseases connected to breathing, inhaling, exhaling your lungs, etc. and all. Tatlo yan na tertiary hospital. There is another one, nasa drawing board na i-construct na rin, ngunit naabutan nga ng 1986. And which is that? That's the trauma center. Dati meron tayo, hindi dati, meron pa hanggang ngayon, yung National Orthopedic. Lahat ng mga nagkakaroon na nadidisgrasya sa aksidente o whatever it is na nababalian ng mga buto, doon dinadala sa National Orthopedic. Doon sila ginagamot. Ang sanang idea ngayon, magkakaroon ng parang trauma center. Ipagsasama-sama na lahat ng mga na-aksidente, nabalian ng buto, anybody caught in an accident or some kind of, it's related to that, kaya nga trauma, natu-traumatize ka sa nangyari sa'yo, that would have been the trauma center. Can you imagine if that were constructed and built today? Naku po, kayo na mga, lahat tayo na nasa lansangan, nakikita natin, sa dami ng motorsiklo. Lahat yan, once in a while, nasa semplang, si Presidente nga, pagparada lang ng motorsiklo niya, natumba pa. You can imagine how important that could have served our people now that just about, well, I don't know, 1/3 of our population in the cities are actually riding motorbikes. So kung nagkaroon man ng nabalian ng buto o may na-disgrasya, diyan sana sa trauma center na yan. Hindi nila tinuloy, sayang. So you could see that these are the ideas that were developed and created during the time, and it was put to good use because you had the structures there. And then you go now to that other area in the Philippine International Convention Center. 33 years ago, hanggang ngayon, ginagamit pa. It is one of the, we had all the best facilities there. Can you imagine, if you had something like, kasi pattern yan after the United Nations, pero mas malaki. At sabi nga ng mga nag-a-attend ng conferences dyan, mas magaganda ang facilities because there could be instant translation, whatever language the convention would handle as far as foreign experts would be there. Like for instance, yung unang-unang ginawa dyan, yung international conference on the survival of humankind. Lahat ng mga scientists ng mundo inimbita dyan para matesting nga yung PICCN, yung Philippine International Convention Center na yan. Kaya doon makikita natin na lahat ng mga facilities dyan, including the offices and of course the venue itself, napakalaki at napakaganda, nagagamit pa hanggang yan. And several other structures there, one of which was really the very first, the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Yan ang unang-unang tinayo. Bakit Cultural Center? Sapagkat naisip nga ni Mrs. Marcos at that time, ano ba ang magagamit natin para tayo ay isang bansa na makikilala natin ang sarili natin, which is really our culture, the diversity of our culture. We have 81 provinces, but we have 78 languages. And you can imagine with 78 languages, ganon din kadami ang kultura ng bawat lugar, ng bawat lalawigan. Every province has its own culture for that matter. So you could see even the way we cook yung mga pagkain. Iba yung luto ng Kapampangan, iba yung luto ng Ilocano. Pagpunta mo rin sa Visayas, iba yung batchoy nila sa Iloilo, iba yung batchoy nila sa Bacolod. So all of this is a diversity. But what unites us all is precisely a common culture, which is our being Filipino. Yan nga yung nakalagay na title dyan sa Cultural Center of the Philippines, the sanctuary of the Filipino soul. Sapagkat dyan mapapakita natin sa buong mundo ang kagandahan, kaya makita ninyo yung banner ng Cultural Center, kagandahan yan. Beauty, truth, and goodness. Kagandahan, kabaitan, what is the other one? And ano. Kaya dyan yung makikita na yun ang ibig sabihin ng sanctuary of the Filipino soul. Sa dinami-dami ng ating diversity, yan ang makaka-unite sa atin. At hanggang sa kasalukuyan, ginagamit pa yan sa mga performances. In fact, that was the first time that we were able to invite the Bolshoi Ballet of Moscow. Nag-perform sila dyan, yung mga magagaling na mga ballet ng mga impresaryo, mga ng ballet, lahat sila nakita natin dyan. Even in the opera, many of the operas were also performed there. Whatever it is, you have a whole complex out there in the reclaimed area where you had also the folk arts theater and then the several others. First, we also had something like a design center there, or the Philippine International Trade Center, lahat ng yan. But what I'm trying to say is, in the 20 years, dun sa budget na 486 and 486 billion, yan ang mga natayo together with, as we said, the road network, lahat ng airports and seaports, lahat ng water system, plus several other of the facilities and the services that were given to the people in those 20 years. Yung kay Mrs. Aquino, yung kanyang 6 years, ang kanyang budget ay 1 trillion 77 billion. Hanapin na lang ninyo kung anong nagawa noong panahon na yon. Siguro yung nilagay nila sa EDSA na hindi sana kailangan lagyan dyan ng LRT kasi EDSA is supposed to be a freeway, 10 lanes sana yan, pero nilagyan nila sa gitna para masabi lang na meron silang ginawa dyan na, na daanan ng kanilang MRT. So yan, sa 1 trillion na budget ni Mrs. Aquino sa 6 na taon. Wala silang pinagpatuloy sa ating water resources, wala rin silang pinagpatuloy tungkol din sa ating electrification, lalo na sa rural areas. And then of course, following her, si Fidel Ramos, another 6 years, ang kanyang budget is 2 trillion naman. 2 trillion 237 billion. So you could see, ang laki ng mga budget nila in only 6 years. Samantalang yung kay Marcos, 486 billion in 20 years, and look at all the accomplishments that were done in those 20 years, in those 2 decades. What I'm trying to say here is to prove that there is no money from the Philippine Treasury that was taken illegally para sabihin na it was amassed by the Marcoses, that they gathered all of the, anong sabi dito? The vast resources of the government have been amassed. Parang napakasakit pakinggan. And then they talk about history and the rewriting of history. Kaya yung kanilang mga korte, can you imagine how many administrations were really controlled by those of Mrs. Aquino? Ilan yan na nakaraan? And they had all the time to look over all the documents in the budget, in the files of all the other offices to find out even just one single document that would show that Marcos got the vast resources of the Philippine government. And then they speak of malice because yung mga korte dinidismiss na ito. They're dismissing it. The last decision was precisely, sabi nga, walang ebidensya. Ang ipinapakita yung mga Xerox copies ng hindi nagbibigay ng proof or evidence na yung document na yon ay konektado sa pagkuha, ito nga, for the amassing of the vast resources of government. I'm talking this way because, as I've said, lahat ng mga dokumento na kinuha nila sa Malacanang. In fact, the first person who entered Malacanang was Joker Arroyo. May his soul rest in peace. He was the executive secretary of Mrs. Aquino. Siya yung unang-unang pumasok dyan. Meron siyang kasamang parang aide niya, si Potenciano Roque. Alam ko ito sapagkat nadinig ko yung testimony sa New York. First hand nadinig ko. At sabi nga ni Potenciano Roque, mainit pa nga yung chafing dishes, yung ulam, kung kakain sana ng gabi because the Marcoses left at about 7:45 in the evening. And when they entered Malacanang, immediately after, mainit pa yung pagkain sa lamesa. So they were the very first that entered. And what did they do? They gathered documents already. They opened the filing cabinets and they got the documents. And the following day, ang pumasok naman yung mga barkada ni Mrs. Aquino, women who are not even government officials, yung mga kamadyong niya, silang pumasok. And what did they do? They started also getting all the documents na napupulot nila, putting it in suitcases, boxes, lahat. Basta nakita nila na bank accounts ito or whatever, they gathered it all at dinala na lahat ito sa bahay ng isang Angelita Trinidad. Isa ring barkada ni Mrs. Aquino, a dermatologist. And from there, dumating dun sa bahay ni Mrs. Trinidad. Again, I am saying this firsthand because Mrs. Trinidad was a witness in the trial in New York. She testified to this. What I am expressing to you now, galing ito sa kanyang testimony doon sa New York. Sabi niya, dinala yung kasama siya ng barkada nila na pumasok ng Malacanang, pero naunahan sila kasi there is a certain Margarita Cojuangco na bumababa na daw, may dalang isang buong suitcase. So tinanong nga siya ng cross-examination ng abogado ni Mrs. Marcos, ano yung bitbit niya pababa dyan? Ang sabi niya, non-documents. So hindi na natin alam kung ano yung laman ng maleta na yun. But nonetheless, hindi mga dokumento. So anyway, Angelita Trinidad, she's a dermatologist, as I said. Na-interview ko rin siya pagkatapos nung testimony niya, ayaw nga magsalita. Ang sinabi lang niya sa akin, do you know, Rita, that we saw that there were 7 dialysis machines dyan sa loob ng Malacanang? Grabe, sabi niya. That was all she said. So I answered her back, do you know that Marco had 7 kidneys? Oh, anyway. So, that's just to make you laugh. Pero yun na nga, pagkatapos silang ikutin lahat ng mga kwarto sa Malacanang, kinuha nila lahat ng dokumento at ito dinala sa bahay ni Mrs. Trinidad at doon, inintay nila ang pagdating ni Mrs. Aquino, hindi pala, I'm sorry, dumating si Salonga, dumating si Fidel Ramos, dumating si Enrile, and several others. And then they brought the documents to the central bank for safekeeping doon. So, ayun. Sila Marcos naman, pagdating nila sa Honolulu, yung kanilang, kung ano man ang nabit-bit nila, mga dokumento man or paraphernalia, whatever it is, kinuha rin ng customs ng Amerika. They also got this. So whatever documents the Marcoses were bringing, hindi naman marami yan kasi madalian nga yung pag-alis nila. Kinuha rin ng US Customs. And then, after that, when they wanted to file cases already against the Marcoses, they contacted first Switzerland kasi ang kanilang suspecha, maraming pera si Marcos sa Switzerland. So they contacted the Swiss government and they had some kind of an arrangement. This is American government and Swiss government. They had some kind of a parang memorandum agreement na kung ano man ang meron na mga konektado sa mga Marcoses dyan sa Swiss banks or finance institutions, pwedeng ang bigyan ng kopya ang Amerika. Kasi they were filing a case against the Marcoses in New York. First in LA and then in New York. So yun, kinuha nila yung mga dokumento na yun. So you can imagine, all over the world, wherever these banks are located, hindi lang sa Switzerland, yung iba sa Amerika, kung saan man pa na kanilang kasi binabasa nila yung mga dokumento na kuha nila, they got all these documents. Hindi lang dokumento. They also got the managers or the presidents of these banks to testify in court. That's why I can talk like this because I heard their testimonies. But they looked over the documents, sabi, ito ba galing sa bangko mo? Yes. Sinong may-ari ito? Hindi namin alam kasi wala namang pangalan ni Marcos doon eh. Meron lang nakalagay doon account number. But nonetheless, they testified. Okay. So you can imagine all over the world, in all the banks, in all the finance institutions, all the documents that they could find in the palace where the Marcoses resided for 20 years, lahat yan, inisa-isa yan. 350,000 documents. Believe it or not, inisa-isa ko rin basahin yung mga dokumento na yan. It's a whole room in the Dag Hammarskjöld Towers where all these documents are located. At lahat na yon ay gagamitin ng United States of America against the Marcoses. Yun yung trial in New York. So kung doon pa lang, the most severe justice system, this pinaka-powerful justice system is the United States of America. Napakahigpit ng kanilang Department of Justice. So you can imagine na talagang siniyasat nila mabuti yung mga dokumento na yan. And what happened during the trial? I think I've already mentioned this and I have to mention it again kasi parating sinasabi na nagnakaw. My goodness. In that trial of 350,000 documents and they had 95 witnesses. May Amerikano, may Swiss, merong Pilipino, merong iba't ibang kung saan mga bansa nang galing. Lahat sila, mga finance institutions, mga bangko, to testify on their bank documents na alam nila, ito yung aming dokumento sa bangko namin, etc. And yet, in spite of this 95 witnesses, and I was there every day for 4 months, listening to all of them speak there in the witness stand, and I went over 350,000 pages of documents. Sa katapusan, nung magtatapos na yung prosecution, yung mga nag-a-accuse, yung Justice Department ng Amerika, ang sabi ng judge, you bring this celebrated case into my courtroom, accusing President Marcos, who is a friend of 5 American presidents, and then he dies. And then you continue this case against his wife. And when you remove all the fancy ornaments, there is not one evidence that you are showing me, sabi nga ng judge, Because when I ask you, where is the fraud? Saan ang magpapakita na nagnakaw? You know what the judge said? You come to my courthouse and then you tell me, gee, we can't find the documents. That's the exact words yan. Kasi nga, ang pinapakita nila, ang laki-laki nung kanilang ginawang chart, ito yung mga bangko sa Switzerland. Tapos ito yung mga bangko kung saan pumunta yung pera na yan. Pagkatapos yung mga bangko sa New York kung saan pumunta yung pera na yan. Pagkatapos binili yung mga buildings, yung mga real estate properties. Kaya ang tanong nga ng abogado ni Mrs. Marcos, okay, andyan na yan. Pero bago dumating yung pera sa Switzerland, saan nang galing? Where did the money come from? Yun ang katanungan. Yan din ang kailangan tanungin dito sa lahat nito mga kaso ito dito sa Pilipinas na nag-a-accuse sa mga Marcoses na nagnakaw. Saan ang dokumento na magpapakita? Unang-una yung mga nasa bangko, saan nang galing? They were not able to come out even with one single document. And that was the time of Mrs. Aquino. Hawak nila ang budget. So makikita nila siguro yung binabasa ko sa inyo, yung 486 billion pesos na nasa budget, pera ng taong bayan na nasa budget ng panahon na yon. They were in control of government at the time. Yun kailangan inisa-isa nila. At tingnan, meron ba dyan of that 486 billion na ninakaw ni Marcos? Wala silang nakita doon kasi wala nga silang ma-present sa New York because there was none. There was no document. And even the judge said, kaya sinabi rin ng judge na yon, Mrs. Aquino may be implementing her laws in her country, but I am in charge of the courthouse here, and we are implementing the American law. Kaya doon medyo talagang napipiko na yung judge, sapagkat sa haba-haba nga ng trial na yan ay walang napapakita ang Justice Department ng Amerika sa tulong din ng PCGG. Sila rin ang nagbigay ng lahat ng yung mga 350,000 documents na yan. Hindi naman Amerika ang pumasok sa Malacanang. Ang nakuha lang ng Amerika na dokumento doon lang sa customs ng Hawaii na kinuha sa mga Marcoses. Ngunit lahat ng dokumento sa palasyo, sa Malacanang, sila ang kumuha niyan, mga Pilipino, PCGG. And all the other documents of the other banks, still, that was turned over to the PCG. That's the PCGG that we're talking about. Na sinasabi dito, vast resources of the government have been amassed. Can you imagine amassed by former President Marcos? Saan? Where? So now they bring the case here to Manila. Alam mong ginawa na kaya ang dami-daming kaso? Just to show you how cruel they were against the Marcoses. Kung doon sa New York, talagang pinakita lang nila yung bank transfers from one bank to the other. Yun na nga, hindi lang mapakita kung paano pumasok yung pera sa Switzerland. Pero dito sa atin, anong ginawa? Same documents! Pero inisa-isa nila. Like for instance, in one bank account, syempre maraming entrada yan. It's not just one bulk na nagpasok ka ng $1 million dyan. So in a series of deposits, in a series of withdrawals, merong mga nakalista yan dun sa bank records. And they filed a case dito sa Philippines. They filed a case for every bank account. Kaya umabot ng 900 na kaso na yan. And all of them have been dismissed except siguro less than 10 na lang ang natitira dyan. Cases. Criminal and civil cases. So you can imagine when Mrs. Marcos came back, and these were the cases that she was facing. And there are only 365 days in a year. And we don't have court sessions during weekends. So ilan lang yan kung talagang aalisin mo pa yung Saturday and Sunday plus holidays. And yet she had 900 cases. And some of them were criminal cases. And in a criminal case, the person accused will have to be present during the trial. Kaya makita mo, paikot-ikot siya from one courthouse to the other dito sa Pilipinas. At lahat ng yan, over the years, lahat na dismiss. Bakit? For lack of merit, for lack of evidence. Hanggang itong kahuli-hulihan nga na magkano ba ito? I forgot to write. 83 billion. Yan, sinasabi. Hindi pala. Yung Coco Levy pala yan. But anyway, meron yung dito sa kaso na ito na na-dismiss din kasi sinabi nga na walang ebidensya. So there you have it. And then sasabihin itong Makabayan Bloc that the Marcoses are insulting the Filipino people. My goodness, listen to what I'm saying. These are court records, and you can look over all of these statements that I'm making because yung PCGG ordered, executive order, that is part of history already. You can Google this actually. And you can look at how it is written. That sa unang linya pa lang, that is the one with malice. Samantalang sa korte, and these are courts that have been trying this, hearing this case for what? For the past 33 years. My goodness. Pero sasabihin ninyo, na-convict naman si Imelda eh. Nagkaroon siya ng conviction dyan sa tungkol dito sa LRT. Well, that is the situation. Sa LRT, she was convicted by the Sandigan Bayan because she was chairman of the Metropolitan Development Authority and the MMC pa, Metropolitan Commission. Governor siya ng Metropolitan area. Chairman siya dyan. Nasabi nga governor siya dyan. She is also chairman of the PGH Foundation. Okay, so chairman siya sa dalawa na yan. Yung sa LRT, sa mga istasyon ng LRT, pinarenta yung mga spaces dyan for advertisement. Malaking bagay yan, malaking kita yan sapagkat lahat ng tao dumadaan dyan. Kaya ang galing ng posisyon kung mag-advertise ka dyan. Kaya yan pinarent. Pinarent yan ng Metro Manila Commission ni Imelda. At yung kita dyan sa rental ng mga advertisements na yan ng LRT, hindi LRT yan, yung space lang ng LRT kung saan bumababa yung mga tao, kung saan tumitigil yung tren. Yung pera na kinita dyan sa advertisements na yan, nagpatayo siya ng 5 building, kasi chairman din siya ng PGH. 5 building ang tinayo sa Philippine General Hospital, nagdagdag siya ng buildings dyan. For the general public, alam naman niyo kung ano yung PGH. Okay, she was accused of, yun na nga, nag-transfer siya ng funds from one office to the other at sabi, malversation yon. So, kinonvict siya. Ang conviction niya is 43 years. Kailangan makukulong siya. But she made an appeal. Doon din sa Sandigan Bayan. She made an appeal saying na, hindi ko naman ginamit yung pera for personal reasons. Nilipat ko lang para magpatayo ng building. First, it was Gertrude Torrena who convicted her. When she went on an appeal, also with the Sandigan Bayan, talagang hinimay nila at nakita nila yung ginastos doon sa PGH, may dagdag pa actually doon sa nanggaling doon sa advertising na kinita nila doon sa mga LRT stations. So, ni-reverse ni Gertrude Torrena yung kanyang decision. In fact, when Mrs. Marcos delivered a privilege speech, kasi congresswoman na siya nung nagkaroon itong kasong ito, she delivered a privilege speech sa Congress. At sabi nga niya, if I have to build the PGH building all over again, I will do it again and again. Yun ang sabi nga niya. Iko-convict ninyo to build the hospital, uulit-ulitin ko yan. That's what she told Congress at the time, and the world, and the Filipino people for that matter. So, Francis Gertrude Torrena reversed his decision. Kaya yung conviction niya na-reverse. Hindi na siya ikukulong. Ang daming tao nagsasabi na convict na yan kailangan ikulong na yan. But that is what happened. That is the case. Look over that case. It's public record. Read it and you could see. The earnings of the LRT advertisements at the train stations were given to the PGH Foundation for the construction of about 5 buildings dyan sa Philippine General Hospital. And then there is also another, yun na nga, sinulat ko yan para hindi ko makalimutan Francis Gertrude Torrena, that's his first name, actually. So, there you have just that one conviction. All the rest of the other cases, kagaya nitong latest case na dinismiss na naman, precisely kasi sabi nga ng court, there is no evidence. It cannot stand, you cannot go on with this trial. Pagkahaba-haba, 33 years. And now they say that it is an insult to the Filipino people. What is an insult? The 486 billion that constructed our airports and seaports. Sabi nga, remember ang Cebu, for instance, paano ba biglang umunlad ang Cebu? Kasi nung nanalo si Marcos ng second time na tumakbo siya for the presidency, which was in 1969, He ran for re-election in 1969. Ang kalaban niya sa presidency was Osmeña from Cebu. Alam naman ninyo, ang Cebuano, hindi lang sa Cebu yan, practically several islands in the Visayas region and several provinces in Mindanao, lahat yan Cebuano. So malaki ang Cebuano block. Yan ang kalaban ni Marcos when he ran for re-election in 1969. So there you have it. Nanalo siya sa Cebu. Kaya nung nanalo siya nung re-election niya, ang unang-unang binigyan niya ng talagang infrastructure programs ang Cebu. Water system, airport, seaport, electrification. Kaya bigla ang unlad ng Cebu. That is history. You look at the records. Ang dami-daming salita na sinasabi na, ang ano na, yung Cebu, ang ano, because in 1969, sila talagang inuna na bigyan ng infrastructure out of gratitude that the Cebuanos voted for him and he was re-elected in 1969. So, here we are talking about changing history. These are all records, public records. You could go over them. Nakakapagod na akong paulit-ulit na itong aking sinasabi. And yet to this day, sinasabi nga nagnakaw. Saan ang ninakaw? And you know, I had to answer a friend of mine sa Facebook na nagsabi din na, ayan pala, nagnakaw na naman, etc. Sabi ko, please, I'm crying out to the world, in fact, to all 81 provinces, to 110 million of our population, if you could find just one evidence, one piece of paper, one witness that can show and prove na merong ninakaw sa Philippine Treasury, sa ating sa tao ng bayan, pera ng taong bayan, which is there, sabi ko nga sa Philippine Treasury, kung meron mapakita na kahit na isang, bring it to court. Baka sakali yung natitira pang mga 3 kaso na yon, baka sakali. But out of all those 900 cases and all of those accusations that they have made to this day, you still do not have that one important evidence. That is why in the trial of New York, bakit nga ba doon nagkaroon ng trial? Why? Kasi ayaw nila na ang trial dito sa Pilipinas. Sabi nga ng Amerika mismo na the act of sovereignty, kung anong nangyayari sa bansa na yan at may ginawa yung inyong presidente, it has to be tried in the country of origin. Merong act of state doctrine. You have to respect the independence and sovereignty of another country. But if they filed the criminal case here in the Philippines against the Marcoses, they would have to be brought home. Because under our law, the person that is being charged criminally will have to be present in court to defend himself or herself. Ayaw nilang pauwiin si Marcos. In fact, day one, yun ang nilalakad na ni President Marcos sa Hawaii, pauwiin ninyo ako. Kaya hanggang ngayon, sinasabi nga nagnakaw, walang makaka-explain, walang makakapagsalita, walang makakapagkwento. Paano ganong kadami ang halaga ng mga pera sa Swiss bank, sa mga ibang banking institutions? Bakit nga? Sapagkat yung taong nakakaalam niyan ay namatay na. He is the one who can be able to testify for himself in his defense where that money came from, but he was not given the chance. So hanggang ngayon nakabitin yan dyan. At bakit sasabihin na ninakaw? There is no proof except this executive order. That is the one that has malice. Because in the first line which I read to you, anong sinasabi nga? Because vast resources of the Filipino people have been amassed by the Marcoses. Oh my goodness. So as I've said, lahat yan, pinalabas na yan sa New York. 4 months, every day, ang court session. Doon sa korte ni Judge John F. Keenan. Andun yan sa Foley Square. That building in Foley Square, we had several courts there, several courtrooms. Isa dyan sa 3rd floor. Yan yung sala ni Judge John F. Keenan. At yung asawa niya, Diane Wilkinson ba yan, whatever your family name is, kaklase pa ni Mrs. Aquino na nag-aaral siya sa New York, nung Corazon Cojuangco pa siya. In fact, when that came out, in the newspapers sa New York, yung mga chismoso sa mga dyaryo sa New York, sinabi na, yung judge pala, yung asawa, kaklase pala ng presidente ng Pilipinas si Mrs. Aquino. The judge himself said it in open court. So what? If my wife is a classmate of Mrs. Aquino, she can implement her own laws in her country, but I will implement here my decisions here in this court. So the judge admitted it in open court na huwag kayong mabahala kahit nakaklase ng asawa ko yan. But still, you know how it is. Kaya sabi ko nga, there are no black and white sometimes, even in the administration of justice. There are also gray areas. At yan ang malungkot. Because in many occasions, even America has violated its own laws. The act of state doctrine, the act of sovereignty, and all of this, yan, they violated that kasi under international law, kinakailangan ang trial dito sa Pilipinas. Pero tinanggap nila doon. Bakit? Kasi nga, ayaw nung administration dito sa Pilipinas sa pauwiin si President Marcos. So, every day, I sat there in that courthouse, I went over these documents, I listened to all of the statements of the witnesses, and that is why I can talk this way. And that is why I can say, tumahimik na kayong magsasabi that there is malice as far as the decision of the courts are concerned. Respect the courts. Look, they have been working on these cases for 33 years. My goodness. Isa pang bagay dyan na sinasabi nga that it is an insult to the Filipino people. Nakalimutan na ba ninyo ka nangyari noong 86? Nagkaroon tayo ng snap elections, hindi po ba? At, well, let me tell you that that is the fourth time that Marcos was re-elected. 4 na presidential elections yan. I have some notes here so that I could give you the dates actually. So Marcos ran for re-election for the first time he ran for the presidency, and this was in 1965. That was his first term. And then he ran again in 1969 for re-election kasi 4 years lang kasi noon ang term ng presidency. Then he ran again in 1981. Kalaban niya si Alejo Santos. And then he ran again in 1986. Yun yung snap election. So 4 times tumakbo siya, and 4 times he was re-elected. How many votes did he get in 1986? I have it here somewhere. In 1986, he had, 1965, ang kalaban niya dito si Diosdado Macapagal. He won, nanalo siya dito as a Nationalista Party standard bearer, 3,861,324. Nanalo siya dito first time, 1965. 1969, Marcos again ran for re-election. Ang kalaban niya, yung sinasabi ko, taga Cebu, si Sergio Osmeña Jr. Marcos received 5,017,343 votes. Si Osmeña, 3,043,122. In 1981, Marcos ran again in presidential election. Kalaban niya, yung sinabi ko nga si Alejo Santos. Marcos received 18,309,360 votes. Si Alejo Santos garnered only 1,716,449. Now, listen to this carefully. Itong mga nagsasabi itong mga nagsasalita sa kasalukuyan na we are, anong tawag dito? Changing history. Ito ang history. This is the record sa COMELEC. 1986 snap elections. Kung di pa kayo pinapanganak ng panahon na yun, makinig kayong mabuti. These are records actually, public records. Ferdinand Marcos garnered 10,807,197 votes. Si Mrs. Aquino, 9,291,716. So mahigit 1 million pa yung lamang ni Marcos ng snap elections na yun. Okay, if there were 10,807,197 people that voted for Marcos at that time, tingnan nyo hanggang sa kasalukuyan, yang paran yung mga tinatawag na mga Marcos loyalists. And do not say that history is being changed. Yan ang history. Hanggang ngayon, andyan pa sila. There is no phenomenon at all like it in anywhere in the world that from 1986 up to this day, sila pa rin na nakikita mo nagrarally dyan. My goodness, uugoy-ugoy na nga yung iba. In fact, one time nga nakilala ko yung isa, sabi ko, nasa na mga anak ninyo? Diba, ito yung mga lola na. From 1986, they're still there, rallying now for the son of Ferdinand Marcos. So that is 10 million that he got in the snap election. So huwag niyo sabihin changing history. In fact, what happened there was this. And again, I can speak of this on a personal basis. I was covering the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, which is the same as of today, except that at the time, we already had the parliament. Isa lang. Wala tayong Congress, wala tayong Senate, wala tayong House of Representatives. Isa lang. We had a parliament already at the time, and si Marcos din ang nagtatag niyang parliament na yan. We were covering this, I was covering it there at the Batasan Pambansa. The Speaker of the House sat there doon sa podium na nakikita niyo dyan sa Batasan, Nicanor Iniguez. Okay. Nagbibilangan ng canvas. Doon na canvassing na ito eh. Who stood beside him? Yung oppositionist. Isang matatag na oppositionist, taga Mindanao, taga Cagayan de Oro, Homobono Adaza. Tumayo siya doon sa tabi ni Speaker. Every time may dumadating na binabasa na canvassing of votes from a certain, sasabihin niya, excuse me, I am questioning that. Sabihin niya, this is public. He was announcing this and we were on live television. So ang ginagawa, naglalagay ng asterisk. Ibig sabihin, wag muna babasahin yan. Saka na lang sa kasi may question. Nilagyan lahat yan ng asterisk. Kasi ang feeling ni Adaza at ng opposition, baka dinadaya ni Marcos. So lahat may mga asterisk. In other words, tinanggal lahat yan ng mga that's Homobono Adaza, and he will testify. And Homobono Adaza is my partner in another radio program. And when you hear him, what will he say? The best president we ever had was Ferdinand E. Marcos. Kahit na daw opposition siya at that time, even to this day, sabi niya, he was still the best president we ever had. So ang tinawag nga sa kanya nung panahon na yon, nung nagka-canvas sila nitong snap elections in 1986, Mr. Asterisk ang tawag sa kanya. And this is the result that came out. 10 million pa rin ang bilang na nakuha ni Marcos kahit na tinanggal na lahat yung mga asterisk na yan. And that is COMELEC record. Kasi hindi na nga na-resolve at the time kasi nagkagulo na, nagkaroon na ng civil disobedience si Mrs. Aquino, tapos nagkaroon na ng rally dyan sa EDSA and all of this. Kaya nga kami mga taga Mindanao, nung nagkakagulo dyan sa EDSA, remember, Mr. Ruben Canoy, one of the brightest minds we have in Mindanao, came to Manila and appeared on television. Nakasuot siya ng itim, may dala siyang passport. Sabi niya, this is the Mindanao passport. Kasi kayo, yung ginawa niyo dyan sa EDSA, kayo lang ang gumawa niyan. Hindi kami sinali dyan. Kayo naglagay kayo ng presidente nyo, si Corazon Aquino. Hindi kami kasali dyan, kami mga taga Mindanao. Kaya kami sa Mindanao, we are independent of you. Manila, we are not part of your rally in EDSA. That's Ruben Canoy. He was there on television. If you look at the records on television, you could see what he said, you could hear what he said. He's still alive. And he owns several radio stations, as a matter of fact. So nagsasalita pa siya hanggang sa kasalukuyan, coming from Mindanao. Yun ang sabi niya, ito ang passport. Kumuha kayo ng pasaporte para kayo makapasok sa Mindanao. At titingnan namin kung bibigyan namin kayo ng visa. Kasi hindi kami kasama dyan sa 1986 na rally niyo. Anyway, it's a sideline that I'm saying because, well, you know how it is. Nagre-rewrite daw ng history, my goodness. You know, I feel so old already. Sabi nga, I'm as old as Methuselah. If you look at your Bible, it's the oldest that ever existed, even older than Noah, or even older than the people of the Old Testament. Nakatatlong ikot na siguro yung buhay ko. Sabi nga nila, they used to joke me, I must have covered the arrival of Magellan, or I must have covered the burning of Manila when it was Sulaiman who burned Manila so that the Spaniards could not take over the city. Anyway, so that is how it is. I have been a witness to history in so many ways, and all that I'm saying is I have read them, I have seen them, I have interviewed them, and I know them firsthand. So, whereof I speak, there is no malice in this. The malice is exactly as I read it to you. Can you imagine the first line of an executive order of a supposedly president who sat in Malacanang saying this of Ferdinand Edrelin Marcos, and all of us associated with him. Before I continue, I will just want to go over some of the comments now. Anyway, kung may mga katanong kayo dito, yan na nga ang sinasabi ko. Tatapusin ko na ito. Ayoko na ulitin ito. That's the Marcoses and the PCGG. Kailangan talaga i-abolish na yan sa lahat ng kanilang mga sinequester. Ano nangyari? Inayos ba nila yung mga sinequester nila? When you sequester something, you have to take care of it. Kung may taxes sa babayarin, ewan kailangan magbayan. That's what they had did to the house of Marcos when he was still a congressman. Andyan sa San Juan. They sequestered it, and then they didn't pay the taxes. In all the 33 years na sinikwester nila, hindi nga nila inayos, hinalukay pa nila. Can you imagine, pati swimming pool, they dug up even the swimming pool kasi baka daw sa ilalim ng swimming pool nagtago pa ng ginto si Marcos. Can you imagine, lahat ninakaw nila, pati doorknob, pati yung tiles, everything. Ang hindi lang nila nalabas, yung lamesa sa dining table kasi it's a 24 seating dining table. Hindi magkasya sa pintuan. Siguro yon ginawa doon sa loob ng dining table, sa dining room. Kaya hindi nila lahat kinuha nila, lahat ninakaw, lahat hinalukay. Pati yung mga libingan ni Mrs. Marcos sa mga kanyang mga lolo, nanay at tatay niya sa Tacloban. They dug up the graves thinking that baka nagtago ng pera o ginto sa mga, can you imagine, sa mga, anong tawag ng pansyon ba yun? In the tombs of her ancestors and her parents and her grandparents, they dug it up and left the bones, did not even rebury them. Kaya nung umuwi si Mrs. Marcos sa 1982, yun ang unang pinuntahan niya, to rebury her dead. Grabe! Anyway, so, again, as I've said, I want to close this chapter already. I'm not defending the Marcoses. I'm only relaying to you first-hand knowledge of the documents I have read, the trial that I am witness to and participated in, and also all the witnesses that I have also interviewed in a way, plus all the things that have been happening since then, and what has happened in Malacanang when I was covering it for television and for the Filipino people. So, any questions you have, just isulat na lang ninyo, baka sakaling makwento pa natin sa susunod. Anyway, so I'd like to read those who send their messages. Reggie Maloloy on Avenido, good evening po. So wherever you're located, gabi na dyan sa inyo. Ryan Sally, musta ma'am, Rita Gadi watching from California. Oh my goodness, you have all of these wildfires. And I hope you're safe. Yes, God bless you too. Thank you. Reggie Malvenido, magnanakaw naman talaga yung mga Aquino. Inggit kasi sa mga Marcos. Buti na lang ngayon, unti-unti nang lumalabas ang tunay na sa... Anyway, so, ito po yun. Priscilla Kojima, senior citizen from Japan, is now watching with you. Kumbawa, madam, yes. Interesting at informative po. Lagi ang tinatalakay ng programa ninyo. Salamat. Arigato gozaimasu. Mabuhay at God bless always. X. Okay. Yes. Available po ba sa public yung mga dokumento? Yes. Lahat po ng mga dokumento ni Mrs. Aquino unless they already burned it. Pero lahat po yan, mahahanap niya sa Congress, sa archives nila, it's all there. Mrs. Marcos delivered almost a 2-hour privileged speech. Lahat ng kinikwento ko sa inyo, andun na rin yan sa records ng Congress para pabanguhin ang administrasyon niya ni Mrs. Aquino. Well, sinabi ko nga, there are 16 PR firms na hinire niya sa Amerika para siraan nga ang mga Marcoses, and one of the PR firms is now the owner of Smartmatic. Kaya nakikita ninyo nangyayari. Sana po maging available sa lahat at mabasa. Opo, yung aking libro, nako, hanap po kayo ng tulong para malabas yung aking libro. Wala po akong pera kasi para maglabas nun. Chacha Balseno Ozalda, good evening, brother. Good evening to you too, Joel Radoco, Vemtudazo. God bless you, ma'am, for mentioning all those Marcos projects. Marami pa, hindi ko pa nga na-mention lahat. Ed Espiel, kasi nga hindi pera ng Marcos yan, pera yan ng sambayan ng Pilipino, kaya tumigil ka sa kakapuri sa nagnanakaw ng pera ng mga Pinoy dinala sa abroad. Ako, kasasabi ko lang na explanation ko, pero kung yan ang paniniwala mo, rerespetuhin ko. As we say, we all have different opinions. Kung ano man ang iyong opinion, ay ginagalang ko rin yan. Joel Ranoco, Vertudazo, we love listening to your program. Maraming salamat. Rory Buenaventura, yes, Marcos forever. Joel Ranoco, share ko ang na-share sa wall ko para marami makarinig ng truth from Marcoses. Can you bring it down again? I just want to answer something which this person said. Si Espiel, yung sabi na nilabas ng pera, dinala sa abroad. I already said it in my program, if you listened well. All the banks in Switzerland turned over their documents and the money here back. It is us, the Filipino people, and our courts that will determine the color of that money and the origin of that money, and they were not able to prove it. In fact, ang nangyari dyan, summary judgment, walang trial. Basta sinabi na yan ay iti-turn over sa Philippine government. So lahat ng yung sinasabi nga na pera ng mga Pinoy, dinala sa abroad, wala yan. Again, as I said, Mr. Espiel, kung meron kang ebidensya, I am calling on you, bring your evidence in court so that finally, after 33 years, we can find one single document and you can stand as a witness that the money was taken from the Filipino people. Anyway, so sige na. Mainit na yung ulo ko. Ruby Araneta, sige nga, anong nagawa ng mga Aquino? O nga, hanapin ninyo. At ikwento na lang nyo sa akin later on. Kuya Juni Gonzaga, Ma'am Rita Gadi, mabuhay ka at ang programa mo na kapupulutan ng mga kaalamang dapat malaman. Ang lalim ng Tagalog mo, anak, ng nakakaraming Pilipino na nabuhay sa panahon ni Cory hanggang sa anak niyang sinundoy. Ay, naku po. Pagdasal na lang po natin. Think ni Tigasan Aquinos ay yun na nga. Kung anong sinabi mo, thinking yun na nga ang pakiramdam ko rin. Dong yun, Linag, umpisa ang paghihirap ng Pilipinas. Totoo po yan. Yan po masasabi ko talaga. Nagsimula ang ating paghihirap noon, 1986. Tingnan nyo ang nangyari. After that, lahat ng ating public services nilipat na to be privatized sa mga oligarko talaga. Tess Baliedo, mga Aquino at Juan ko ang mga magnanakaw. Yan, may history yan. Pwede niyong i-google yan. Kung saan nanggaling kasi ang Luisita, kung paano nabili yung mga ari-arian nila dyan. Nasa history na po natin yan. Basahin ninyo. Mga, meron siyang sinabi dito, mga, alam nyo, pati hayop hindi natin talaga matutulad sa kanila Yung sabi mo nga, mga gahaman. Naku, napakalalim ng Tagalog ninyo. Francis Lazo, 30 years ng hukay ang Aquino ng evidence. Walang nahukay. Totoo po yun. Hukay ng hukay. Physical, likewise. Yung sinabi ko sa inyo, pati mga libingan nila Mrs. Marcos, hinukay sa Tacloban para naghahanap nga. Sa Ilocos, hindi sila makahukay. Kung sino mga Ilocano siya, talagang binantayan ng mga Ilocano. Walang nasira sa mga bahay nila Marcoses at lahat ng mga gusali doon. Sa Leyte, marami silang mga sinira doon. Guys, Salvador, suck it to them. I'm not sucking it to them. I'm relaying only what the truth is. Tandaan ninyo ito. There are no two sides because we are not political. There is not the opposition against Marcos or the Marcoses. There is only the side of the truth. And that is what we're talking about in this program. Tess Baliedo, ngayon lumalabas ang hindi talaga magnanakaw si Marcos. Arlene Tobias, it is true, Madam. Reggie Maloloy, on Avenido, Makabayan Block. Ang ganda ng pagmura mo. Alam mo, yung pagmura mo yan, nadidinig ko yan madalas talaga. Walang kwentang bayaran ng mga etc. Okay. Magkikwenta mo ang 20 years sa dami ng projects. Oo nga, hindi ko na kinuwento nga lahat Manuel Manalo, Marcos talaga ang tunay na hero. Marcos talaga ang tunay na hero. Paano gawin nila? Yan ang katotohanan ng mga Aquino, ang salot ng bayan. Darasam Sampaga, President Ferdinand E. Marcos, the best president of the Philippines. Arman Loyola Marcos pa rin. Yes, ganyan nga yung anong side natin. Roel Rodolfo Bobo na. Oo nga, marami. Hindi lang sila nagbobobobobohan. Sayang, matatalino sila pero ayaw nilang tanggapin ang katotohanan. Daisy Tinaya Marcos pa rin. Aki Gubatan, Watanabe, Solid Marcos, Carlito Ramirez, Palom, Marcos pa rin, Joel Rodolfo. Mag-asawang sorry, ang hirap ko magbasa ng Tagalog. Magsasawang pakinggan. Akala ko magsasawa ka. Hindi ka pala magsasawang pakinggan ng programa niyo po. Thank you very much. God bless you too. John Felix Pascual, question. If Marcos was ousted from position, is President Cory the rightful? Hindi po. Hindi siya ousted. Nilabas siya ng mga Amerikano. Basahin po ninyo ito. Kayo mga nasa Amerika and wherever you're located, ang libro po, ang title, Triumph and Turmoil. Yun ang title. Ang author po niyan, si George Shultz. Si George Shultz po, siya yung Secretary of State nung panahon na nilalakad nila ang pagtanggal kay Marcos. The last days of February 1986. Sinulat po niya lahat yan. Hindi po siya ousted. He was removed. Marcos was removed by Washington under the administration of George Shultz. Sinasabi ko administration because they kept it a secret from Ronald Reagan. Raul De Vera Jr., actually you have answered many of the questions I have had before against the Marcos Gadi, particularly the conviction made against Imelda. Yun po, record din po yan. tingnan po ninyo, yan si Francis Gadi, for whatever it is, I respect the man. Siya ay talagang anti-Marcos, pati yung asawa niya hanggang ngayon, si Vicky Garchitorena, barkada nga yan ni Mrs. Aquino. Galit na galit talaga sila sa mga Marcoses. But he is an honest judge. And sabi nga, even when he was trying the case, now sila Marcos were still in Honolulu, at naalala ko noon si Rafi Recto, asawa nitong ating senador, Rafael Recto, he appeared in court. Kaya tinanong siya ni Francis Garchitorena, "Are you appearing on behalf of Marcos?" Sabi niya, "No, amicus curiae, just a friend of the court." Pinayagan siya magsalita, although it is not part of the court record because he was not lawyering for the Marcoses. Gusto lang niya magsalita yung sa nalalaman niya. Pero hindi siya, kasi sabi nga, it was Marcos who wanted to come home to defend himself. Kaya, yun. That is Francis Garchitorena. Kaya wala kang masasabi sa ginawa niya as far as revising his decision is concerned regarding the conviction of Mrs. Marcos. Saan ka napunta yung ano? Andito yun sa first page. Nawala na. Anyway, babasahin ko sana yung tungkol kay Marcos, pero eto, saan ba yan? Ayan. Right now, we're having the bar examinations at the University of Santo Tomas, my alma mater. Diyan ako nagtapos ng aking filosofiya. And many of this taking the exams would be lawyers one day. At sabi nga, dami-dami nating abogado na sa Pilipinas. But still, it's one of the professions that are chosen by a lot of our students. Ito yung para malaman lang ninyo kay mga kumukuha ng bar ngayon at yung mga abogado rin. Ito, yung headlines dito, UP tops the bar. Ito yung sinulat sa mga dyaryo, 1939. Marcos is the bar top notcher in the year 1939. Unprecedented record. Criminal law, 100%. International law, 100%. Legal ethics, 100%. Civil law, 98%. Procedural law, 97%. Commercial law, 97%. Political law, 95%. General average, 98.1%. He topped the bar that year. Okay. Ang sabi, nung nag-top siya ng bar, as usual, yung mga naiinggit, yung mga nagbabatikos, sinabi nga sa Supreme Court, baka nandaya yan. Nandaya siguro yan. Paano yung makakaroon criminal law? Napakahirap. 100% siya. Legal ethics, lahat na yan. Sa mga civil law, lahat 98% ang kanyang average. 98%. So sinabi, marami nagbatikos, ang mga nagsabi, nagdaya. So Marcos, in front of the Supreme Court, told the members of the Supreme Court, "You can test me right now where I stand." Dito sa mga sinasabi ng, yung mga ano na yan, yung mga sinasabi na nagdaya ako. And you know, ang nangyari pa nga, as he was being tested there verbally by the Supreme Court, tumaas pa yung kanyang grade as he was being tested. And remember, he defended himself in court when he was still a student of law. Kaya doon natin makikita ang galing nitong presidente natin na ito. So whatever else that you would question about, he knew the law. He followed the law. And as I've said, everything that we're talking about is all part of the law that we are discussing now. And there are no two sides of the law. There is not you, the opposition, who considers decisions as malicious or rewriting history. There is no side as far as the Marcoses are concerned in their defense. There is only the side of the truth. And that's exactly what we are saying today. And I hope that the rest of our programs after this will likewise follow the same trend. God bless all of you. Thank you for having joined me. This has been your hour.